They're gonna catch my checklist. That's a bad bet.
Welcome back to Never Fade, the NFT Podcast. I'm your host, Faxx, as always, with the one and only GoodMonth ETH. How you doing, Good?
I'm good, boss. What's Gucci? Who we talking to today?
Oh boy, today we got another special episode lined up for our loyal listeners. Thank you so much. We appreciate your feedback. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube and follow us on Twitter at Never Fade NFT. You know, we've had a few episodes talking about the visualized value ecosystem, couple with Jack, baby boy Jack Butcher,
Baby
couple of,
boy.
we've also hosted some of the biggest collectors in the visualized value ecosystem, the largest holder of checks, Shrimpto, shout out Shrimpto, and the largest holder of Opepen, board Elon Musk. So we've got to host these guys on the episode and see where they're coming from, see how the gears are turning. And you know what? These are two very unique people. And frankly, like, I'm happy to have them as whales in these collections. I think that these NFTs are in good hands with these two. What's your take on our visualized value whales?
Yeah. I mean, at first with Shrimpto, I didn't know his end game. You know, at first I'm like, oh, this looks like somebody who just, apes hard and, holds on to things or dumps them. I didn't know. We kind of did some wallet searching on this guy. But then after hearing him talk, I was like, yeah, it sounds legit. He sounds interested, but I didn't know if he was just bit by the moment, bit by the cycle up. But to see how Shrimpto holds it down with his bag, and he's the check god. Like, he just, he's in it for the right reasons. It's awesome to have that, like, paperweight. And I said that to Jack. I called his, like, two holders, like, paperweights, as it's big. Like, a lot of collections have that 2-3 big holders that they're just in it for the right reasons. Shrimpto's definitely one of those. And Board Elon, like, late to the game, but saw an opportunity on Opepen, and I think he would have been a Shrimpto if he was there in time, if he had this revelation in time. Someone actually called him out on one of our threads on Twitter, on the clip that we posted about Board Elon selling apes to get into Opepen, and somebody commented, like, bad play, two different spheres. And I was like, yeah, fair that it's two different spheres, bad play, subjective, throw that comment out. But Board Elon actually came in on that comment and said, yeah, but one of those spheres doesn't feel very accepting right now. And I was like, okay, we didn't get that in the pod, but I can see that. I get that. I understand. He's motivated for community. He's motivated to find that community again. And community has broken down for the most part around these things. Bear market, blur, meme coins. Community's hard to find. So Board Elon's looking for a community. He's got it.
Yeah, no question that, like, this is a great spot for these communities to build from. I think both of these people are, in it for reasons that will contribute to longevity of these collections. And so, hat tip to both of those guys. Hopefully they tune in and catch this. But today we have a special guest appearance here by Jalil, actually the developer working behind the scenes here with Jack, launching these contracts for checks, for Opepen, and, helping with another person in the mix here, Traf, who we haven't talked to, but we're happy to host Jalil, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. What are you hoping to learn from Jalil today?
So I think I want to get into the building process of visualized value. We've heard from Jack. We know how he thinks a little bit better. We don't really know how Jalil thinks. Like, obviously there's a lot of synergy between the two, but I want to know what the man behind the code really thinks about this project. Does it make him feel something? Or is he just engineering Jack's vision. And I have to think that's just like an incredible, insulting thought to even put out into the universe. I have to think that he's not merely just engineering Jack's vision. I think he has a big part to do with it, and I'm excited to figure out what that part is.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully we can share some more insights about Opepen. I know a lot of our listeners, um, they want to hear more about it. So let's go ahead and bring in Jaleel now. All right, we
Jaleel!
have Jaleel in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing, Jaleel?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
The pleasure is all ours. Just to kind of kick things off, we like to get a little bit of background on how people landed in the matrix, found themselves in Web3. So if you don't mind kind of sharing with us, how did you get into Web3? How did you hook up with Jack?
So I got to know Jack before the whole Web3 stuff, through Visualize Value, his brand. Before Web3, he had an educational business and just a design studio, I guess, publishing like dope visualizations on Twitter, which I totally vibed with. And then he pulled me into Web3. I guess my journey as a sort of developer-esque web developer started basically all the way back in school. I built like band websites for the metal bands around and would refer to myself as like an internet kid. Like I grew up with the internet. I lived in a super tiny village. There was nothing to do other than go in the mountains and chill on the internet. So early exposure with like the band websites got me interested in web tech. And then over the years evolved more and more into like a full stack developer, which was kind of the perfect setup for me to dive into Web3 early 2021 when Jack pulled me in. He dabbled with his first NFTs on Foundation, and it was fascinating. So I jumped in as well.
I love that. So you're bitten by his designs, and he was an internet kid. That's that's the reality. Is he was like, I'm going to build business and teach other people how to build their kind of internet fingerprint. And it sounds like that captivated you.
I mean, it was so Jack's content, like anybody who hasn't browsed the VV site or done any of his courses, there's like this one course called the Permissionless Apprentice. It's $1, and I don't know how long. It's like half an hour or an hour to go through. That, and of course there's other stuff as well, but that is like super approachable. It is one of the most mind-shifting software version upgrades for your brain you can get, and for me it was extremely helpful at the time. Like I dropped out of uni. I got married super early. I got a bunch of kids. I had never had like a normal sort of a path, I guess. And also here in Germany, like business isn't taught anywhere, right? So like how to approach, I think like learning stuff was always like natural to me, but then applying that in a way that is sustainable to earn an income, really, I never really worked at a proper company. I always did my own thing, but I always struggled at like properly monetizing my skills. And then through VV, that's really where that was so freeing. Like Jack's approach to building a business, just incredible. And that was before the Web3 stuff. It was, for me, I had my little software agency at the time. It was the most freeing experience over the past, the prior 8 to 10 years. So definitely recommend.
Yeah, that's amazing. So Jaleel, digging in on that for a minute, is such a unique perspective to, not have a lot of application for the business mind, and seeking that yourself. Can you remember back some of the big breakthroughs that Jack's class and his teachings kind of were aha moments for you? And if you can't, that's fine. But I'm super curious.
I think the most important piece for me was like this notion of not asking for permission. Like in Germany, what you're taught is like you're a cog in a machine and you're supposed to do what you do, and do that well. But like lower your ambition in a way, right? Like there's a process to everything, and it's a very like people are gonna approach you and ask you to do stuff because they see when you're good at your work or whatever. That was like my thinking. Hence, I never really, especially because I didn't work in traditional environments, I never really got the opportunity, I think, to like properly show my skills. And one of the core notions in visualized value, in the visualized value ethos, I guess, is this the permissionless apprentice. The title says it basically in a super condensed way. It's this idea of not asking for permission and just doing something of value and basically sending that over to the other side. And I had one of Jack's mini products was like a time management system, and it's on paper, and I always wanted an app for it since the first time I saw it, basically. That was actually the first VV product I ever bought when that came out. Anyway, so I wanted to build this app, and I asked Jack a couple times if he'd be interested in me building it. But for him, like, who's this guy with this weird name? I have no idea who he is. I have no idea what he's good at. And funnily, like, last time I asked, 2 or 3 weeks later, I get an email from him with an invitation to this permissionless apprenticeship course. And I go through that, and I'm like, fuck, of course. Like, how would Jack know what I'm capable of? I just built the fucking app and send it over, and then we'll see. And he really I did that. He really liked it, and from like we built our collaboration and friendship from there. But like taking that first step and just going ahead and building something, that is the biggest, I think, learning or insight from the whole VV ecosystem. I mean, it's super deep, and there's so many things you can get from that, but I think that's the most important one for me.
Yeah, so I think that's cool because that really speaks to a core of Jack that we've seen throughout this project, from checks to Opepen. He's a CCO guy by nature. He's a take it and run with it guy by nature, it sounds like, right? Don't ask permission, build, and also a proof of work guy, if that makes sense.
Right. And I mean, you still have to be careful and respectful with somebody's brand and IP, etc. So I didn't just publish the app. I sent it over, and I offered him to just share it with the community, or if he'd be okay with me sharing that with the VV community. So I think that's also important to be careful about, like, not overstepping any boundaries and stuff like that. But definitely, like, at the core, just go ahead and build stuff. And if he wouldn't have wanted me to like share it with the community, I bet that like I could have like rebuilt it in a way so it's not an exact copy of a system and then published it somewhere else. But the important thing is, to just build something and try and provide value to people.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, and like this anecdote right here, this like example, I think underlines the reason why a lot of us believe that Jack Butcher and Visualize Value have the right mindset for Web3, right? So it's like, consider this. The last, like, I've been in the space for a couple of years, and I've watched a lot of people that have potential, that have talent, that have resources, frankly, underutilize those attributes with relation to like things that they've spent so much attention on and money on. And so then they end up asking when maybe they should be asking when themselves they're going to like step up and start contributing and building and testing those limits of like what they can do to contribute. And like, I think that your anecdote there kind of like underlines this general thesis. And I think what we have in like the Visualize Value community, both from the people I've interacted with that are interested in checks and Opepen, is this mindset of like, hey, like, I'm here, like I love the art, but like I want to like do more, and I think like how can we tap into that? Like that is the alpha of potentially this entire ecosystem breaking out to the next level.
I love that. Yeah, I 100% agree. I think what both of these projects, Checks and Opepen, they both embody the visualized values or ethos, I think, wonderfully, and package it sort of in a more approachable or scalable way that is Web3 native also. One of the most, like, for me, a big part of the Checks story is a call for accountability and responsibility of each individual to like take ownership and check stuff for themselves, and the power that comes with that, I guess. And Opepen, similarly, like both of these are of course very multi-layered, but also like reducing this form to this minimal art and inviting everybody to create their own spins and interpretations of that, and lowering the barrier through AI. I bet we can talk a bunch about that later. But both of those are like a call for unleashing creativity, unleashing like taking ownership of your what, like, thoughts, actions, etc. And yeah, that goes perfectly in hand with the older VV stuff that was born in the Web 2 era, I guess. I vibe with that 100%. One more little mini story on that, maybe. Like, if we remember back to early January when Checks like really took off, right? One of the biggest, like the win-win crowd was immediately asking like, where Discord, when this, when that, right? One of the smartest moves, and I've been running a Discord for like 2 years now, myself. With at one point it had like 12,000 people in it. Now it's at like 2K, and there's, I don't know, 60 active people left. Anyway, like managing that is such a hassle, and consciously choosing not to do that for Checks and later Opepen totally flipped the notion of what it means to participate. Right? Basically what you said, rather than just consuming and expecting something to be done, something to be announced, etc. And as a proxy, of course, we see that on Twitter as well. But not giving that kind of conversationist thing a place, and just reinforcing through Jack's retweeting of everybody's creations what it means to be a part of this community. If we remember back, like he was constantly retweeting other people's interpretations of Checks, all these memes created, and we just saw hundreds of memes created. And I think that's just I think that was very novel for a project at the time, and 100% also aligns with this idea of inviting everybody to create, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Appreciate you sharing that. And I mean, we've seen like a lot of examples of, people who have put a lot of time, again, energy and money into a particular like NFT ecosystem. And then like I've always felt like kind of like the mothership, whether it's like the main account or whatever has like the distribution potential, is not necessarily like showing some of their like really most engaged participants enough love. And that's something right away with Jack, where I was like, look at Jack. He's just like, bam, retweeting this guy, sharing this guy's art, sharing this guy's interpretation. And I vibe with that, like
100%.
That's what I would do. 100%.
An extremely
right?
generous, like, use of his platform. And of course he can curate what he thinks like hits the bar. But like that just like created this amazing, flywheel of content created from everybody. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that most of our listeners are pretty familiar with Checks. We've done a few episodes, including some with Jack, talking about the mechanics and the idea, the philosophy behind it. What I'd really like to like kind of ask you is that because we saw this, you know, really catch fire and it got very exciting and there was a lot of interest and engagement, but behind the scenes, you know, especially in your role as a developer, there was probably like a lot of pressure, a lot of maybe some touch and go situations, some stress that comes along with those expectations. So can you speak to like a little bit from like the builder perspective, like kind of like what you went through, some of the learning experiences, some takeaways?
It was a wild time. I mean, the stakes of this. So maybe just for anybody who doesn't know about checks, it consists of 2 contracts, and we're migrating. My job was basically create a new like little library of contracts. The job of which was to have people send over their checks, which were at the time gaining in value at rocket speed, and like basically sending them over, burning them in the process, and issuing new fully on-chain generative art tokens that are unique to everybody. It was one of the most, no, it was the most complex piece of code that I had ever written. And at the same time, the stakes were extremely high, with like basically millions of dollars moving over to this new set of contracts. So not effing that up, obviously, was I don't know. It was a exciting, painful, very intense time.
Yeah, the pressure was on you. The pressure was on you. Like so like, but you had the confidence to like make it happen. You know, like where does that come from? Where does it come from that you're like, look, I can do this, I can execute this, and you did. You know, so like, what? You know, where does that come from?
Do you know this thing? There's a saying to it, but I forget. Like, you need somebody to really believe in you to be able to do whatever you have to do. Anyway, do you know that? Like, there's this thing, right? So, Jack is that for me in a way. Like, he had such trust that I would be like more than I had myself, I guess, to be able to pull that off. And shout out to him. Thank you, Jack, for that. There is I do think over the years I've learned, like in the early days of me being a software developer, I was always extremely self-conscious about not knowing enough. There's it's just this software development, whatever. It's so vast of a field, and you can niche down in like one thing so deeply and be like professional in just that, that you always feel like you don't know enough, you don't know it all, etc., right? And I think over the years, I got exposed to multiple situations where I was sort of thrown into the water and had to just do whatever needed to be done. And I had a friend back then also who was like a complete autodidact as well. And he sort of taught me to like anything you want to, like any problem, probably has been solved by somebody on the internet already. And B, so you got to learn how to find those people, I guess. And then B, just to not be afraid of any unknowns and just dive in and play around with it. And this like playfulness, I think, that this guy embodied sort of taught me to try and do the same. And looking back, I would never regard myself of myself as a like a good software developer, right? But I don't know, just play with the stuff and like do more, and then something cool will come out. And the whole checks contracts were a journey as well. Like the stuff like the gradients and things like that, right? Like we just played around with and added that over time while we were building it. And like you will stumble over cool things when you just like plunge into the unknown and like try and navigate that and build something.
Yeah, you're singing to the choir here, because GoodMonth is like the king of FAFO, fucking around and finding out. I'll tell you what. So absolutely, it sounds like that's what it is. It's the art of FAFO. And basically, Jack was just like, you're on the edge of the cliff. Like, I don't know. And he's like, just go, man. I love that.
And I want to hear a little bit about your working process together, because I've seen some things on Twitter. I've seen some things on the TL, and I'm so curious as builders. It's clear as a builder like myself that works with engineers and, you know, goes through product design and work with engineers. It's very clear you guys are firing on all cylinders with synergy. There's times where someone will say something on the timeline. They'll ask for a feature request, and Jack within like 4 minutes will reply and say, we could probably have this done, you know, by the Opepen drop, or we could probably have it done. Now, in speaking with Jack, he's a thoughtful dude. I imagine, you know, he's not making that shipping decision on his own, but you're gonna have to educate me there. How does the relationship work with when ad hoc features come up and you're on timelines? Walk us through the the process of working with Jack in that scenario.
I think I know the one instance you're referring to right there. Was that Elon asking for like zoom on photos? Actually, that one Jack just replied, didn't ask me.
Shoot.
That's completely fine. Like, I think he has enough of an understanding of like how difficult something is. We've done a bunch of work also, like me screen sharing, and just so he knows how I work and sort of what takes what amount of time. So, something like that. I don't know. It's probably like half an hour of work or an hour of work or whatever. And like we have a Discord chat and a Telegram. I don't know. So we go back and forth between the three of us, Trav, Jack, and I, and we just most of our work is asynchronous. Like 95% is asynchronous, and then I think we've gotten really good at one thing I think is interesting about this team. You would think, I studied but dropped out. But originally, like I always refer to me more of as a designer than a developer. And the same is true for Trav. Like Trav is a full-on designer, right? And of course he knows web tech. And Jack is a full-on designer. So you would think there's this crazy overlap of like competencies in this team of people. Like, why? Wouldn't it be smarter to have a full-on designer, a full-on like Solidity engineer, a full-on web dev, and a front-end dev and back-end dev and whatnot? And us all having this background in design creates this very seamless flow of communication where we just feel like we understand each other, we speak the same language, we have similar taste, and that just makes the whole collaborative process much, much easier. I think that's the biggest, like, I asked that, I myself, like, questioned, like, because we have been working together, even, like, another designer artist on a project back in 2021, and it was, like, basically 4 designers working on something together, and I was like, hang on, are we, like, over allocated on this competency? But I don't think so. It's like extremely freeing if there's this deep level of understanding and we speak etc.
Yeah, that is super interesting. I think that's why the output at the end of the day is so clean, right? Like, let's be honest. I think a lot of people that are listening to this podcast are hanging on their edge of their seat about Opepen, about what's going on with Opepen AI. We had release 1 and release 2. I was fortunate enough to land a clean, solid color
Nice.
Opepen release
Oh,
1.
the
So
blue one, right?
the
Your
blue
current
one,
Twitter. Love it. Yeah,
yeah,
awesome.
man. So I dove right in, made it my profile picture on Twitter, and in my mind, it's like I feel like you know Jack designed like this Web3 Lamborghini for me to like cruise around the internet on. Like I feel like it's like streamlined and clean, and it's this kind of like interesting feeling that I get from it. So that being said, there's some really like new mechanics that are at play here. So just to kind of generalize where we're at is there's a total of 16,000 Opepen. There was a very small like shortcoming of 16,000 originally, and essentially Jack dropped one to each of the single check holders as a reward, and then that rounded it out to 16,000, and then the plan is to drop 80 at a time in these series, and then within the 80 there's different rarities. There's 40 rarity, meaning 40 that are the same, then 20, then 10, 5, 4, and 1, which is in line with kind of the same numbers and mechanics with the checks. And so it's a little complicated for, I think, the average person that just sees this, on Twitter, especially considering there isn't like a Discord, an official one. There is an unofficial Visualize Valley Discord, but can you speak to just kind of like in general, maybe fill out the rest of the color here on the mechanics of Opepen and kind of like the staples that people need to understand from this point, or kind of how we got to this point?
Yeah, definitely. All right, so maybe it's makes most for me, like if we think back to checks, in my mind, one of the big statements of the checks originals is like this notion of like it's very crypto native, as in like we deploy this contract, it's non-upgradable, there's no administration rights, the rules are predefined and set and set in stone like that forever. For as long as Ethereum is up, that thing is going to work as it has in the very beginning, and there's no way for us to change that. That is a beautiful thing, but also removes a ton of like flexibility to play with what is happening while people are migrating, which will be an infinite sort of probably process. I don't know if we'll ever see all checks migrated, right? Also, the while I do believe the meme of checks is complete, like absolutely timeless, what we saw initially with people reinterpreting checks and making these memes, etc., was sort of a one-time event. I don't think that will reoccur. Both of these things, I think, kind of set the ground. How would you say that? Basically, set the floor for the thinking that went into the Opepen mechanic. To maintain flexibility over the long term, so it's sort of the same thing, right? To be able to reinterpret the same thing over and over and over again in ways that are timely, interesting to that specific time and environment, and themselves create like these mini impulses of and invitations for other people to participate and create, and sort of have an easier path to stay top of mind over a long period of time. And by that, I don't mean 24/7 top of mind, but a reoccurring theme over however long this is going to take to reveal. So what we started off with was close to 16,000 of the same token, right? And then a few iterations of the art later, we have this iconic, simple abstraction of the frog, right? The pee. And then we had to figure out how do we integrate that into checks somehow, or play off of the checks community and etc. Because there definitely was a big overlap. And how do we distribute these? Like, what's an interesting approach to distributing these tokens, or making them unique to everybody holding the token? And initially, I think most people know that the idea was just basically your checks that you hold will be informing the colors of the tiles of the Opepen form.
That was only internal conversation, right? There's speculation.
I think Jack actually published that in the first Opepen transparency time thread on Twitter. That's how it's going to be. But although I might be confusing this, but definitely that was the initial thought here.
And the ship was sailing that direction. The whole team was aligned.
That direction. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we did realize quite quickly that there was a bunch of problems with that approach. In terms of, like, a collection of 10,000 is already like we don't understand how much 10,000 is. It's a shitload of like individual images, right? 16,000 is like a bunch more. When you browse, like the CryptoPunks, let's say, or any of these collections, and you, because the floor might be all mixed up or whatever, you get the impression that they're all unique. But then when you actually like categorize them by trait, the whole, like, the notion of something being unique is completely, like, you can throw that out of the window. If you go to CryptoPunks.app and like search for pink hat or wild hair or whatever, one of those traits, what you'll find is like not being able to differentiate. Like, for some it might be just like a few shifts in hue for the skin color, and everything else is the same. We call these like our unique PFPs, etc., etc. The problem with Opepen, with the initial, basic, what we now see as the first set, just the pixelated tiles of color, that would have been crazy for 16,000 tokens. Like, it would be impossible to like differentiate between them. And there was a bunch of like problems with, like, well, if a single color 80 check maps to the token, and a one color, like one check which has one color by definition, maps to the Opepen, like, how do you differentiate between the two? They're both like unicolored Opepen. Problems like that sort of made it obvious that approach was flawed from the get-go. And then we grappled with this stuff for weeks. Meanwhile, Jack found or dove into this whole AI stuff, the generative AI, and applied his prompting learnings to the Opepen form, which was, to all of us, wildly fascinating to see how good this has become. For my first project, I did in 2021, little pixelated landscape banners. I did a similar thing. It's 10,000 tokens every day. An AI reinterprets sorry, I go off on tangents all the time, reinterprets the pixelated image and creates like an all painting version of it. But that AI is like one of the first open source models that were out there a couple years ago, called VQGAN Clip. And the quality of that comparing to what we've been playing around with for Opepen is just like bonkers. I don't want to know like where we're going to be in 2 years. Okay, so Jack was playing around with this, and then we realized, damn, this is actually perfect from a story point of view for Opepen. Like in a way, like this. I actually dove into like what does the frog actually stand for or mean, and I don't know if Matt Fury, the creator of Pepe, had like any of that in mind. But like even if we go back in mythology and stuff, the frog is a symbol for growth and sort of fertility and stuff like that, right? And then realizing there is the only way, like there is an infinite number of interpretations of this iconic form, the Opepen graphic, and to tell this like the story of infinity, there AI is the perfect like AI makes it even more obvious that like it doesn't cost you really anything to create a new version of this, and we can play that forever, basically. So what makes this piece of art valuable if it's not the visual component to the art? And I think that again goes back to a bunch of like VV thinking, like what is a token, what is an NFT, what is an image, why are they not the same, what makes the image actually interesting, why is something valuable, etc., etc. So all that fit perfectly.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think what you're describing is absolutely like kind of the detail about the thinking process that our listeners are going to enjoy, because it's like you quickly found out that the colors by themselves, they were not going to create unique PFPs. Then you discovered that the symbol of the frog and fertility and growth really aligns with this idea of AI, which is just like this. It feels like is growing faster than anything else. And it's just like, here we go. And you landed on this concept of, creating unique PFPs using AI, which we saw that in release number 2. Correct. So like release 1 was really that initial interpretation of like, we're going to use colors. There's only 80 of them. Then the second release of 80 was the first distribution of AI. Do you know why specifically the release 2, that particular AI output was used?
We basically went back to all the different AI interpretations of Opepen that Jack had posted to Twitter, actually some of them I'm not even sure if he had posted, but definitely stuff that he had created so far, and then we just went ahead and curated from there, or Jack did, and chose the ones that like sort of felt most interesting to him. And the first one, it's just the like it felt right to like sort of tell the story of how this thing came about also. And maybe one important meta thing is like AI is an important and is going to be an important piece of the Opepen journey, but not all of the drops will be AI made. One core thing I think we want to be telling here is we're inviting everybody, and actually like I had a bunch of work done on like an actual user interface for as a front end to Stable Diffusion to create Opepen interpretations, make that super easy for everybody. That's not released yet, but I hope I can get back to work on that soon and get that out there. It is an invitation for anybody to create with this. And yes, AI will be an important piece, but not all the sets will be AI made. There will be some by artists, some by maybe the community, some by Jack, some generative ones. We don't know. And that's like, again, this is we really wanted to have something where we have full flexibility over the long term. So if people are not vibing with that idea of like watching Jack create something in a cohesive sort of story over a longer period of time, then this like might not be for them if they feel uncomfortable about not knowing exactly what the thing's gonna look like, etc. Yeah, so it's not all going to be AI. It's not, there's no like rules on the timing of the drops. There might be 10 in a couple of weeks and then none for a month and then again one every week. So we don't know. But I mean, we will definitely ship 200 sets. That I'm sure of.
Is it safe to say that from a timing perspective, it's going to be kind of based on the pulse of the market and just kind of how things are going, or what can you share about the timing?
No, I don't really know. That was the entire point. Like really to lean into maintaining flexibility, and we did that both on the like what's interesting maybe from a tech perspective, the metadata for the Opepen, both for so actually maybe one thing that we didn't go into, if I may, the release of the rarities. Would that make sense to go into that?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So we had all these 16,000 tokens, each the same, and then we had to think of a way to like distribute tokens with like sort of different collectible mechanics to people. I think people underestimate the how difficult it is and how important it is to like design a good collection that goes beyond the individual token, but how sort of the distribution of rarity and recognizability, etc., within the collection plays out. I think there's collections where it's just I don't want to call out any names, but I think this one is okay. Do you remember the Mechaverse collection?
Yeah,
where like
yeah,
everybody made fun of when they released that.
Let's dunk on Mechaverse. Nobody's gonna stop you from dunking on Mechaverse.
The Dyson vacuum cleaner meme. You remember that? Anyway, so there you have a collection which is like completely illegible. You can't read it. And I don't know if that was true for the metadata as well. But it's certainly true for the imagery. And to design a collection which is interesting as a collectible, where people, it's interesting, like it's easy to understand, it's easy to like sort of collect. It has multiple points of entries. For the CryptoPunks, for example, you have 8, I think, aliens, and then 60-something zombies, and so many apes or whatever, right? And then all the rest are humans. So you have this very clear sort of distribution of what is rare, what isn't. There's only 200-something hoodies, etc., etc., etc. That makes a beautiful a collection where some stuff is like really hard to attain and some stuff is more entry level. And that creates this easy to understand game or engaging game, depending on how deep you go into it. And having 16,000 tokens all the same is super uninteresting from all unique. Sorry, not all the same. All unique is super uninteresting from a collectible point of view. So, right, if everything is entirely unique and there's like every piece is a one of one from a collectible standpoint, that's just like what in a way, like in my mind, it becomes hard to differentiate between what is a token Opepen and what is just a generated Opepen that like will have millions of over.
Yeah, it becomes like a little bit overly subjective as to like, you know, what's rare, what's valuable. But what's interesting is with this release one, it seems like even though the most common one within that quote pack is the solid color, there's 40 of the solid colors. I think that that's an aesthetic that, is potentially the most pleasing. And so in this particular pack, like the common ones ended up to be really cool. And so that's kind of a little bit of a curveball here too. And I guess like that's exciting for people that have the quote common unrevealed Opepen, because like who knows, like maybe what, and the common one that ends up revealing is something that is really appreciated in the market. And so that's the kind of thought process behind creating those rarities within the drops, is essentially you want to like add to the collectability of the collection.
And that's where we introduced like the checks sort of waiting. So if you had checks burned down on the originals contract, those sort of influenced your chances of getting a rarer Opepen and stuff like that. And that was like a randomized drop still. Everybody got their rarity assigned. All the code for that, by the way, actually for everything Opepen, all the like the website, the API, the contracts, everything is open source on GitHub. We've never shared the links to that really, except for the metadata API. But if anybody wants to dig into that, you can on the visualized value GitHub. Anyway, so yeah, that first drop just distributed all the rarities. So in these sets of 40, 20, 10, 5, 4, and 1 of 1s. And then we started releasing the sets. The first one is a dynamic set, and the second one is a static set, meaning within the drops of 40, of 20, of 10, of 5, and 4, each image would be a variable, like a variation of the same form in the first set, and for the second drop, it's they're all the same within each bracket, and that we will play with over the future drops as well. But from a metadata standpoint, what you see now is going to be like that sort of the framework in which we will navigate over the long term. So we have like artist, set name, and then this is it dynamic or is it static sort of.
So really like the series 1 drop, it's actually like 81 of 1s, is it not?
If you will, yes, I would agree. From a visual standpoint, for sure.
From a visual, because all of the solid color ones, which are the common ones, because they're the 40s, they're actually all 40 different colors. There's some similar. I've seen some other blues that are close, but I believe they're all individual different colors. But then for release 2, the 40, they're all the same. Then that's what you mean. They're static, correct?
Yeah, exactly. Within each category of the 40s, 20s, 10s, etc. Except for the 1 of 1, of course. That one is unique. I think one interesting bit about, if we think back, have you guys talked about that on the pod? I think so, maybe. Maybe with Board. This notion of like, say you have in the CryptoPunk world, you have like people gathering around single traits, right? There's community forming around hoodies or knitted hats or wild hair, etc., etc. So sort of you find your space, you find your community in the abstracting away of the individuality of your token, right? So this, I think, is also really interesting in terms of the storytelling of Opepen. Is like, yeah, we make that the default in the sets, and in terms of the sizing, and in the edition sizing within each set, and then for the static sets also in the artwork of the edition within the set. Right. So
yeah, no, we talked about this with Jack, around traits and like traits being the tastemakers. And this was in 21 when those were the guide rails. That was the framework that we were allowed. You buy a punk or you buy an ape, you just kind of, people just coalesced around the trait. It was a community pillar. And that was really strong, and it is very strong. I think, do you have a hoodie, Punk? Is that what you
I
rock?
don't. No, I have
Okay.
Wild Hair Punk.
Wild Hair Punk. And Punkscapes was your project, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So we should definitely go into that for fun at the end here. But yeah, so I mean the traits are like Wild Hair, Hoodie Punk, things like that. They're still really strong, but they have broken down. And they've broken down because some people are transient throughout the traits. And I think what's phenomenal about Opepen is y'all took that trait being the tastemaker as, you know, and you blew up, you made that a framework at a macro level. And so you have this framework that is the trait. Opepen is the trait. It's the symbiotic central nervous system of the collection. Sets are kind of the, you know, a trait as well. And then the additions is the kind of the non-unique part, but also abilities to have communities come up. And I think it's fascinating because I think what you're doing is you're definitely engaging people in the space and you're retooling their mind a little bit around collection. You're retooling the way they think about how they're going to go about this. And when I first saw the Opepen mechanics come out, I just was like, my gut reaction was to go the opposite direction of everybody else. Everybody was like, set one, set one, set one. And obviously the market still really values set one and being selected. And I think that's going to hold up very well. But I'm a set 200 guy. Like I want the final piece. And if Jack and team, if y'all decide like just 200 never comes, you know, and you do the whole Dr. Dre, you know, album coming soon never comes, then hey, I'm happy holding the blank of the 200 set.
I mean, the blank is a statement as well, right? I think one of the cool things we do also is, while the initial rarity release was a forced thing for everybody, right now, and again, this is also not set in stone, might change. We will like, again, leaning into the flexibility, we really want to explore different drop mechanics, etc. Open, like publish all the code used for that, and just play around with different ways to do this. But one thing we leaned into, at least for the first couple, and I think for a bunch in the future as well, is the ability for people to choose themselves to opt in to the set. Like we show you the set. Do you like this? Do you like? Yeah, it's like it's. I love the music analogy. It's like a CD release of a new album that you can buy or not, I guess. And then you can opt into that, and then it might be applied to your Opepen, and only if there's enough demand, at least 2x, 200% demand for the number of tokens that are available in the set.
And quick question on that, Jaleel, and I know y'all will have a like an amendment to this when it gets there, but you know, I'm a one of one Opepen blank holder. I imagine there's another one of one Opepen blank holder that also wants that 200 set.
Yeah.
So you know, we're not going to get 200% demand on that one of one come the later the people that are holding out, basically.
Definitely, yes, of course. Yeah, it'll get interesting. Like I guess in a 100 sets or so. There will be different strategies. I mean, obviously the math doesn't work out, even with the oversubscription of 2x for the last set. There's only 80 tokens left.
I've been having dreams, man. You've been in my cerebral. Like I literally have been having these like Opepen mechanic dreams. They're surreal. No one wants to hear other people's dreams, so I won't like go into detail. But basically, basically, there's like the single check holders. I have these like I have these single checks floating in my dreams, and and we're in this standoff. Like there's this standoff going on around. Like I think you guys have. I think what my subconscious is telling me is that you guys hold a lot of power over me. And you might get into, you might get me into a situation. You might get me into a situation where they're like, you know, no more drops are coming unless GoodMonth uses uses his one of one. And then it's a standoff between me and Bored Elon or me and Shrimpto. And then you guys announce that like only the black check can override. And what do we do? What do we do?
Gabe, he's got, I don't know if you've seen Jalil, but he's got this hoodie punk, that he recently acquired. And then on day 69, he burned down to a single pink check. And he took that pink check and he put it over the face of the hoodie punk. So it's a hoodie punk with the pink check. And now no wonder he's having nightmares about, drop 200. Man, this guy is like deep in the consciousness of the visualized value ecosystem. But also just the fact. So like this is interesting, right? Because I think most people that, maybe are overexposed. I don't know what it is that they don't feel like they don't feel comfortable with the unknown, and they're thinking like, when am I going to get my Opepen? And oh man, I missed on number 1 and 2, and they don't feel good about it. Here's good on the other spectrum saying like, oh, I'm going to hold on to this blank. Where does that come from? My opinion is that comes from a confidence that time will only elevate this collection. And he's thinking like, drop 200. That's the final drop. I want to be live. I want to catch that. That's going to become the most important piece. So it's like the total other perspective from, I think, a lot of the general feedback that I'm getting so far about what's going on. And that's what you get with Good. He's always going to like pivot, and he's always going to like keep you on your heels about the way things are being thought about. But that brings us back to like, you mentioned this important point about the subscribing of the drops. So for everybody listening, when a drop becomes available, there's an opportunity, a window of time for people to basically say, yes, I want to be part of this drop or not. If there's less than 200% subscribed or demand, if you want to put it that way, then it's never dropped. And we don't know exactly what happens. Maybe it gets archived for later. Maybe it gets, we never hear about it again. Who knows? But that's a new mechanic and something that's innovative to this project as well. And it kind of like gives you guys a little bit of a dial here on the supply and demand piece of these particular tokens. Can you speak to a little bit about that mechanic? And is that the thought process, kind of like the puppet master over controlling supply and demand, or what?
It's an interesting, I mean, sort of capturing the zeitgeist. If there's like a ton of demand for Opepen drops at a certain point in time, I think probably we will sort of issue more sets in rapid succession. And when things quiet down, we can also take a break for a few weeks or whatever. I think that's definitely one part of it. Another is sort of in a way, to me, it is a promise of Jack at the end of the day to deliver something that people appreciate enough for there to be at least X amount of demand, right? And if there isn't, the thing will not be released. It's a great proxy for, is Jack's taste informed enough so that a number of people find it also interesting and want to be a part of that particular set. And doing it this way sort of, I think, creates this, like, at the end, good, you were right, like, the math doesn't work out. We'll have to play with this dynamic a bunch, right? Because what does happen when people hold out, etc., I mean, we come into a checkmate situation where, like, the community basically has the, like, sort of blocks, or even just the one-of-one holders block the release of a new set or new sets in general. It is a promise that we will create something compelling enough so that people actually do engage with it. That is the hope, I guess. And I think that most people probably don't see that the dynamic that creates. If a set isn't, to answer that question, Faxx, isn't oversubscribed, then we will not release it. Like, and it'll go on the like Opepen cemetery or whatever, and then a new one will replace that set number, and then like the next one will just slot into the previous. So I let's say if 003 has no demand, then we'll do another one, which then would be 003, etc.
Yeah, I already know the mechanism. It's gonna be, drop 170, all one of ones holding out, and y'all are gonna be like, well, we're just gonna update the metadata and call all you one of ones dead because obviously you don't want none. And then you're gonna watch us all ape in and play us like a fiddle.
Yeah, that's gonna be interesting. I can imagine a bunch of funny things. Like, for example, what if we would just like take some one of ones, or choose a one of one for a set where there's no like there's a huge demand in all the other categories, but not for one of ones, and just choose one at random, in a provably random way, similar to how we selected these initial ones, and just lock that forever on the black and white outline. So, sir, you will never get one.
Or maybe that's the most rare.
Yeah, maybe.
You stand up the website, with the subdomain minesweeper.opepen.art, and you just throw up all those one of ones, and you just watch the Minesweeper game play.
And burn them all. Yeah, sure. One note, maybe Faxx, to the point of people being insecure about when they're gonna get their Opepen. I think one part of the story, and we definitely have to do a better job of sort of telling that and explaining that and making that easier for people, is we want to, on the opepen.art website, we want to have a sort of front and center way for people to participate and create their own versions, whether that be in like them uploading their like hand-drawn stuff or napkin Opepens, whatever, or using our AI tools, etc. And then sort of lean into this notion of, why does this image that if you want a one of whatever, just like go ahead and create it, right? And sort of invite people to do that, and sort of take this notion of that thing has to be this particular token for it to be that. Like, if you want like unique art, just create some and use that as your PFP, and use Opepen as like this proxy to the meme, proxy to the idea of being a part of this community, and play with the collectible dynamic, which is super simple. Like, one of the simplest collections, I think, with this simple rarity distribution. Like, that is awesome in my mind. And so it is if everybody like just creates their own imagery and finds their own way to express their values and what they vibe with, etc., and use that as their PFP. So definitely an invitation for to people to participate and just play with the meme, the Opepen graphic themselves, rather than expecting their token to be revealed in a very short term or whatever.
Yeah, and when you lay it out like that, it does remind me a lot of the Tyler Hobbs's QQL, in kind of giving people blanks to play perpetually until they want to mint their one of one. And I think the thing about QQL, and not that this episode's about QQL, but it's fascinating because QQL was amazing. It was great. It still is good. And there are people, it's created this very kind of insular, deep community for people who love prompting QQLs. And I hope that in 5 to 10 years, we get this boom of QQL users that have been in the building community all this time. But the thing about Opepen, it's like QQL in that case that you just described, like not the Opepen reveals, but the Opepen prompting for one of ones. It's like QQL with that dash of meme that has always allowed you guys to stick with one of your main pillars that not a lot of people think about or talk about, but Jack has been open about, is ubiquity. And like making the Opepen framework ubiquitous is something that I've always been attracted to with Opepen, and the ability to have a framework, the ability to have it based on memes, the ability for it to proliferate, I think is something that's so fascinating. From an engineer perspective, I'm curious, how do you see Opepen as the framework proliferating into Ubiquity?
And I mean, no done. By the way, beautifully put, and I fully agree with everything you said. I think for both checks and Opepen, the sort of the success of these projects must be measured long term and just how wildly used the memes are. Like, I want to see checks like sort of embedded all over user interfaces. For Opepen, we have this little checks icons for the set categories, for the oversubscription, etc. Like stuff like that. I just want to see all over the place, like verified transaction, like stuff, sort of this kind of usage, like just ubiquitous usage. And for Opepen, I personally absolutely vibe with the idea of sort of completely reversing the dynamic of checks long term. And this is not a done decision. Jack and I have talked about it a bunch, but I hope he doesn't kill me for mentioning this here. The end game of checks is we have a few tokens left, right? There can be 3 black checks in total, and then a handful of other, depending on how far down they're burned. Like probably never gonna get there, but that's in theory the end game of checks. For Opepen, what I would love to see is an infinite number of Opepen tokens, actual tokens, sort of born out of this original collection of 16,000. Why do I think that is interesting and not a problem regarding supply is I often ask myself what would have happened with punks if Larva Labs leaned into the notion of people creating derivative works of art. Rather than fighting against that, which created a lot of confusion and ambiguity and blah, blah, blah in that community, what would have happened if they had maybe even on their site something like derivative.cryptopunks.app or whatever, a way for people to create and engage with and collect all of these derivatives created based off of punks. And in a way, I think like 90% of everything we see in the PFP space is a derivative of punks. So what would have been the dynamic? In my mind, a very possible, how that could have worked out is that even more than they are now, like there's a bunch of confusion, I guess, with like punks and V1 and this and that. They would have been the apps, and they still are, but I still find it fascinating to think about. It wouldn't, at least I can say that, I think, it wouldn't have subtracted anything from the value of punks if there was like a way to explore all the derivatives, right? And if that would even be sort of encouraged by the creators. And I think that's, like the encouraging part is definitely what we're leaning into with Opepen, right? That's where we want to get to, invite people to create their own. But then what I think would be interesting is rather than have people mint their Opepen on whatever Zora or whatever, I mean, we could still use Zora Tech maybe for it, we'll see. But what I would find fascinating if there was like, if Opepen.art would become this portal or something like Opepen Sea, you know, like a huge, like an ocean of Opepen, the tokens that people can trade with at different price points, and it's super engaging for like like my kids, you know, like actually I have this on my desk here. My kids just love playing with like the Opepen stuff. Like I can imagine a few years like the kids will have these trading cards or tokens on their phone, and rather than like doing Pokemon cards or whatever, they can do this stuff and learn about money and whatever in the process. And I want to get Opepen to a point where that can be a reality, like where we have just an ocean of options for people to play with at any price point. And sort of, I think if we are smart about it, that is actually like a value add for the original token.
Yeah, and this is where you and Jack are just so incredibly aligned and firing on all cylinders, because on the second pod that we had with Jack, he made a comment, And it's kind of stuck with me because I'm like, where was he going? Like, we didn't extract this comment, but he made this comment on the podcast that was like, you know, one day I can see, you know, one day I feel like it's just like Opepen trading for Opepen. And we didn't double click on that, and it bugged me. So I'm glad that you're bringing this up because it's kind of the same similar vibe and vision. As it's like, hey, what if, you know, you said listed at different prices, and sure, maybe there's market pricing, but what if the community just trades Opepens for Opepens? What if Opepens, you know, people just trade Opepens for different activations or different experiences, and it's not guided by you all, but it's community driven. One of the things that I've been doing like wild is just right click saving Opepens that hit the timeline that I like. So I have this whole photo album just blasted with Opepens, and it just kind of like really made me think of like, you know, those KAWS statues, the KAWS statues that people have in their house, and people like, they know the statue, they're different colors, they're unique in themselves, but people are like, oh, that's a KAWS. Or when people are talking about a specific artist, like, you know, oh, that's a Pollock, that's a this, that's a that. Like, I do see this, that's an Opepen. Like, what is the Opepen? It's a trading card in this case. Or, and Nouns has done a really good job with the noun goggles, you know, as like, oh, you know that, like, that's nounish. Those are the noun goals. Like, you know that, and that's been their builder ecosystem is come into the ecosystem and you build and get some treasury, but proliferate the nouns goggles, like proliferate nouns. And I think that, like, you take the meta of nouns, you take the meta of memes, you take the meta of, you know, prompting in QQL, you take the meta of apes and having fun with images and IP, and you take the meta of uniqueness with CryptoPunks, and it's just like, I think you all got a lot wrapped up here. And I think the other thing about Opepen, you know, hearing about the Opepen C, on our first pod with Jack literally was turned off of NFTs because he didn't want to put his work on OpenSea because of the way it would make his work appear. So this is a grassroots passion with the team. I think we're stepping in some alpha here, fact.
Absolutely we are. And to your comment about, like, you know, what if CryptoPunks had a different perspective, Larva Labs had a different perspective on the derivatives, like, so we saw what happened. We saw all of these, you know, unsanctioned derivative projects pop up and all create their own, like, basically making money off of the IP, but saying, oh, this is different because this trade, kind of like challenging like the IP kind of concept in general, which is interesting. But in reality, like, that spend could have been captured within the Larva Labs ecosystem through like a derivative process that was encouraged
as a celebration of the original at that point, right?
Because the original, the provenance speaks for itself.
100%.
People could become part of this ecosystem and part of this collection, and this all goes back to what has become, I think, a clear staple of Opepen, which is the concept of proliferation of the meme, permissionless proliferation of the meme. And it's like, what does that do? It creates more awareness, it creates more marketability, it makes the pie bigger. And I think that that's an important concept here. And the other thing that's being played with is this pack concept, which, you know, like, you know, of course, like Pokemons come in packs, you know, trading cards come in packs, but something else that's native to our ecosystem here that a lot of people entered the space with is the NBA Top Shot pack. And like the excitement of getting a pack, opening a pack, getting to receive a pack was very important part of that process, but they totally, completely, you know, lost everybody with the oversupply and with not having any pulse of demand and just pumping and pumping and pumping, which ultimately looked like greed. And so this is like a kind of like a a response to that of like, no, look, we have the excitement of the pack, but it's a finite supply. You already know what the supply is. Now we're operating within that supply. So I think that there's something there too. And also the concept of the pack, it really adds to like the collectability that you guys are going for here. So I think that covers a lot of ground with Opepen. And we learned a lot about you, Jaleel, and your background. And frankly, it makes me more bullish on this whole visualized value ecosystem, because I can see like the passion and kind of like where you're coming from as somebody who's demonstrating the power of internet and the power of creating, on your own, and then aligning with people who share a vision. So with that, Jaleel, do you have any kind of like other messages or departing words here for our episode today?
No, I think that sums it up nicely, actually. Yeah. I mean, I'm Jaleel_ETH on Twitter. If anybody has any questions or ideas or whatever, you can tweet at me, and I hope to reply. And yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I'm just as excited for what's to come with the Opepen stuff as you guys.
Good. There it was. Jaleel, man, this guy's a shining light in our ecosystem, man. That's my takeaway. I loved talking to Jaleel. What did you think about this?
Yeah, fire conversation. You got a fire builder behind VV, and the VV process is unfadable.
There it is. Good. We met Jaleel. We talked to him. This guy is like a shining light in the ecosystem. I loved what he had to say, man. Honestly, it makes me happy to know that, Jack is working with somebody who can align with on so many levels, including design. What did you think about this conversation?
Yeah, makes you happy. That's keyword. Stop talking, say less. Jaleel makes me happy, makes you happy. He's a good, happy dude, and he's a smart dude, and he has the passion for the project. Like, he's not going to just churn out because he gets a better job opportunity. He's on a life journey. I think watching him talk about Opepen versus watching Jack talk about Opepen is two different experiences. When Jack talks about Opepen, in my opinion, he's talking about it holistically and from a macro level and how he wants people to perceive it. When Jaleel talks about Opepen, it's coming from what he wants to see and what he wants to feel. And I got a little probably too high on hopium in that podcast, because I feel like when you take that guy who's got eyes on the perimeter and you take that guy who's boiling the magma in the core, well, you got a cool world and planet to walk on, boy.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, hey, you know what? It's somebody that, we got to get back. We got to get him back on the podcast. Like, I think the interesting thing about the Opepen experience is like, it's going to keep going, and there's going to be, more releases and more art. And then this, kind of clarification that there will be this opportunity for holders to design their own Opepen, not even necessarily using AI, but also, in any kind of fashion that they want. So this is exciting stuff. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that episode. That wraps it up for today. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube and follow us on Twitter at NeverFadeNFT. To our producer, Hazy B at Hazel B Jordan, take us away.
Let's go. That's a bad bet if the bags check less. About to burn back to back, flipping not cheap when that Jenny duh hits. That's the race to 250 in the world and you chose to sleep. That's a bad bet if you wake up checkless. No more people without bags, yet they need status. Running head first with the VVcheck thirst. Never heard of a hearse, what they